welcome back to my channel. In today's video, both Archer, sleeping baby, and I are going to talk to you about what exactly a contraction feels like. And this must be the biggest question that I get, both in my work as a birth doula, but also in my work in education. So in antenatal education classes, in hypnobirthing classes, well, how can I expect this sensation to feel? And it is such a great question, because the more you can do to prepare yourself for that sensation, the more easily you will be able to move away from a place of fear and unknown and more towards a place of confidence and feeling empowered when it comes to the experience of meeting your baby. My name is Kitty Hackle. I'm an antenatal educator, registered general nurse, lactation consultant, and hypnobirthing instructor. I'm also a birth doula and a postpartum doula. I'm now mum to two sweet baby boys and gorgeous Jess, who's my bonus daughter. I talk about everything from trying to conceive, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, breastfeeding, and everything in between here on this channel. So that's the sort of thing that you're interested in. Make sure and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next video. So firstly, we can't discuss how a contraction feels unless we understand how it works and how those surges work to bring our baby from inside our body to outside our body. And just a little reminder for you, when it comes to the birthing of our baby, our uterus being a muscle that simply contracts, shortens and relaxes, you've already done the hard work. You have built 2 kidneys and a heart with 4 chambers. You've done the complex stuff. This stuff is simply a case of contracting and relaxing that muscle to help your baby come earthside. I like to use that visual or that analogy of that sort of tubing of pink icing on your cupcake. You squeeze from the top to help the icing come down and swirl that lovely icing on the cupcake. Or that last little bit of toothpaste that you're squeezing from the top to help come down through the bottom. It's very, very similar when it comes to our uterus. And you have really and truly 2 different types of fibers. You've got your cross-sectional fibers and you've got your longitudinal fibers. So in order for those to work and make changes to your cervix, it's got to do a fair bit. So when it comes to the Braxton Hicks versus our surges that help to make the changes on our cervix and help baby move down and out, there's 2 different ways of looking at it. So for the Braxton Hicks, there's generally just a contraction that works inwards with our cross-sectional fibers and then relaxes without making changes on our cervix, generally without any kind of rhythm or pattern. Of course, if you are concerned about your baby's movements or you feel like your waters might have released, particularly if you are prior to being term, so prior to 37 weeks, always make sure and check out with your healthcare provider as soon as you can. When it comes to our surges that are working towards getting our baby earthside, however, and making those changes on our cervix with the help of baby's head to pressing down on all of that lovely cervix to helping it soften, ripen, open, and create space for our baby's head to move through, we want to have our fundus working, which is, of course, that lovely thick muscle layer that's at the top of our uterus. So what happens is those surges that help to bring our baby earthside begin from that fundal layer. So that's where they differ from those Braxton Hicks contractions that don't make any changes on our cervix. So the contraction starts at this fundus, and what happens is the uterus actually thickens up behind that fundus or behind the cervix and draws back behind baby's head, making the changes on the cervix where it softens, opens and thins out or effaces. So as baby moves down, the uterus and all of its muscles draw back behind baby's head, helping baby move down and out. So when it comes to those early surges, you might not yet notice a pattern in them. They might go from maybe being 60 seconds to 10 seconds with big gaps of 20 minutes or more in between, and then slowly build up a rhythm. They might be felt like lower abdominal cramping, similar to what your early period cramps might feel like. I know it might be a long time ago since you've last felt them, but if you can remember back to how those were. And equally, it might be felt as a sort of a dull, achy pain across the lower back region. Generally at this point, with little rhythm to them, you should be able to talk, walk and move as you like through these surges before they begin to sort of build up in intensity. And while this is called the latent phase or early phase of birth, a lot of change is actually happening. So doing your best during this time to just continue life as normal, whether that be sitting down and watching a bit of TV, going for a nice walk, doing the dishes, maybe making a plan for this time. So if you're preparing for your birth, you might think about, I'm going to make a birthday cake for my baby. I'm going to do a little bit of pampering. I'm going to maybe put on a face mask, paint my toenails. Things like that can help you pass the time without getting too caught up in that what I call the excitement phase of birth. So as your baby's head is creating that lovely pressure, and ideally, depending on their position, equal pressure on your cervix, it will soften, open, and create space for baby's head to move through. And as that happens, you should notice the sort of intensifying of those surges or contractions. And at this point, you might notice that they have created a rhythm or are coming at some degree of pattern. So while at this point I would still say leave that timer alone, be able to try and get into that left side of your body and just relax and go with whatever sensations you are feeling, maybe using your breath, maybe getting into the shower, other comfort measures that you might have learned prior to this point. You might notice at this point the sensation becoming more like a wave. So just in the same way that a wave will slowly rise to a peak, before it holds its peak and comes down and ebbs away, so too does your surge or your contraction. So what happens, and what you'll be delighted to know, is that no matter what phase you are during your birthing of your baby, that peak or the crest of that wave will only ever last 1 minute. So my favorite mantra and affirmation for this phase of birth is, you can do anything for 1 minute, mama. So now that we've reached what we call the active birthing phase, you might notice this pattern and this regularity in your surges increasing to what may look like every 3 to 5 minutes between those surges. And at this point, your body has done so much fantastic work to help your baby move down through the inlet of your pelvis and into that middle region. At this point, you should be feeling those surges intensifying and becoming more powerful. A lot of women will experience the intensity of this sensation as being very much like lower abdominal cramping, as well as it being in and around sort of lower back and hips. Some women will experience this sensation as their body opening up to allow baby to come through. So using your tool of visualization during this phase can be really powerful, reminding your body to open like a flower, to allow everything down below to soften and open, and reminding your partner, if you're a birth partner watching this, to soften their jaw due to the impact that that has on everything down below. One of my favorite Instagrammers uses the term floppy face, floppy fanny, and I just love it. While it's not anatomically correct, it's just a hilarious way for you to remind your body to soften and allow everything to just relax and open down below. Another thing that might be really useful at this point is an affirmation. So whether it's that one affirmation that you've had stuck on your mirror, the back of your bathroom door, or your fridge, somewhere where you'll see it nice and regularly, my favorite affirmation for this point was just to surrender. So at this point, you might be feeling that sensation of, you know what, I've had enough, I'm going to go for an epidural, when in actual fact, you can be quite close to birthing your baby if you continue to do just as you have before. Those nice, slow, deep breaths, focusing on the exhale, breathing down to your baby. At this point during your labor, just as the same as any muscle can cramp or fatigue, like that if you are running a marathon, you might notice you get a little stitch, or you just become a little bit tired when you're coming to that big hill that you have to go over. It's equally normal for your uterus to tire at this point. Make sure and keep your eyes out for a future video on what to do if labor slows down, but in general, you're thinking about coming back to your basics, taking a little rest in between your surges. So that means simply putting your head down into the birthing ball or into a set of pillows. If that means lying on your side for a few surges, fueling your body with things like water, electrolytes, taking a break for the loo so you've got your bladder and your bowel emptied, so there's plenty of space for baby's head to move through and birth to move on, things like that. keep an eye out for that future video, but reminding yourself that your uterus is a muscle just the same as any other. So now comes the part you've all been waiting for, that part just where you're about to meet your baby. And while it's something that you've been working really hard for and you're really close to meeting your baby, for those of us who have managed to avoid any medication or having an unmedicated birth up until now, it can be the point where you go, hold your horses, I've had enough, I'm going to go on holidays instead, or let's get a puppy. And this is really, really normal. So being ready to meet that stage or that phase of transition, just as your body will meet about 10 centimeters of dilation, is really, really helpful. If you're a birth partner watching, reminding your partner that this is exactly what they expect, and this means you're really close to meeting your baby, can be really, really helpful. So when your baby is coming to that point, just as you're reaching around 10 centimeters dilation, while it doesn't always mean that is the phase for pushing, tuning into your body, just in the same way that if you were to have a puke, you don't necessarily have to tell your body to do that. It does it naturally. It's a reflex. It's something that's done instinctually. So if you're able to tune back into your body as your baby's head meets that lovely hammock or sling of muscles that we were talking about, what happens is you have the Ferguson's reflex kick in, which tells us how to birth our baby. So you'll get that sensation to bear down. Sometimes around this point or just coming up on that point, you might feel a lot of tension in your hips as your body is very much opening to meet your baby. You might feel a lot of pressure or rectal pressure down below as baby's head is really working their way down, getting ready to come out into the world. Listening into your body, breathing down to your baby, breathing through your sensations, and using your down breath or J breath, if you've been practicing hypnobirthing, is exactly all you need to do to get through this phase of birth. So now you have breathed your baby down and out and your baby's up on your chest. So many of us love that pushing phase because it's really active and it gives us something to focus on, something to do. But equally, so many of us love that sort of those surges and riding those waves. For me, one of the first things that I said after meeting both of my babies was, let's do it all again tomorrow. I want you to have such a positive experience that you feel the same way. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about how you can have a powerful and empowering birth experience, make sure and check out my website that I'll have linked down below, and make sure and check out my e-course where you can learn more and access all of those lovely free downloads that I've created especially for you. Make sure and tune in so that I can see you in the next video.